Guys, Bn146 here. Welcome to today's video. Got some classical game analysis ahead. Earlier this year in January, I was invited to play in the National Chess Championships of my country. It was a big honor, of course. It was my first time competing at that level. And yeah, so in this video series, I'm going to consider each of those games. It was a 10-player round robin, so 9 games in all. I'm going to analyze each of those games, show you what I did right, however few they may be, and then the things I did wrong, and see if you can learn something from it. So yeah, enjoy. Welcome to round 1. So I was playing black against one David Ameku for the first round. A bit of context, this was not an opponent I wanted to play as black in the first round. I was a bit nervous. This was my first time at this level, but also he was a very dangerous opponent to face as black. Now his rating at the time of this tournament was around 1700, but then everyone knew him to be very grossly underrated. In fact, at the time of this recording, which is some 7 or so months after the event, his rating is 1780, almost 1800. I think he gained like 60 points in 1 month, and he's still quite underrated. So he was a dangerous opponent, particularly as black, because up until this point, all of my serious over the board opening preparation against 1e4 consisted of replying with 1e5. It was what I was most comfortable with. It was what I knew the best. But and I know he plays 1e4, and I know he likes to go for these Scotch Gambit type positions where you get a lot of play for giving up a pawn, and I really do not want to have to defend against him, because he's very good in such dynamic positions. So just for this game, I studied a whole new opening. I played the Caracan before, but I never seriously studied it as an opening to play at the classical level. But a couple of days before the tournament, I took some time out to at least get a basic repertoire running just for this one game for a one-time use. And it did serve me well, so I'm happy about that. But let's go through the game and see how it developed. So he started 1e4, c6, d4, d5, the Caracan. He went for the advanced variation. Taking a look at a bit of his games online before, so I expected this. I played bishop f5, the most common response. He went for knight f3, and after e6, bishop e2. I think the so-called short variation. It's very popular at the very, very top level. The super grandmasters play this a lot. It's supposed to be quite good. It's maybe a bit strong, but it's not too bad for white at all. But of course, at our level, these things mean very little. Now I responded with c5, like I had prepared. He went c3, trying to hold the center together. I replied knight c6. He castled. I went knight g e7. He went bishop e3. And now from here, I think I was out of opening prep a bit on my own. So the first idea that occurred to me, since he had just played bishop e3, forsaking the defense of this b2 pawn, was to go queen b6 and just directly hit that pawn. He defended with queen d2, and now I need to castle. I need to get my bishop out, but first I need to get my knight out. So I went knight g6. Then he went rook d1, a curious move. I looked through the database later on, and it is a move that is played, but only with a very specific point. Because of course, you are developing the rook to a file that is still closed, and you can't yet be sure as to whether it will become open or not. But the justification for this move is that white intends to play the very next move, c4, blowing up the position, putting a question to black, because white is much more developed. If you can notice here, black still has 2 moves to go to develop his bishop and then castle. But then white has already castled, has most of his pieces in the play, with the exception of these 2 ones, and is looking quite strong in the center with the 2 bishops. So rook d1 is a fine move, but only if followed up with c4. And I play bishop e7, ready to castle, and instead of playing c4, he played a3. I'm not sure what the point of this move was. I think he might have been feeling the pressure of my queen staring down b2, and he may have wanted to play the maneuver a3 b4, which is one of the ideas in structures like this, especially in like some Slavs as black. You can play like this, but here in this particular position, a3 didn't do all that much, mainly because of my response c4. What you do with a3 is that you weaken a lot of these light squares. And if I let you play b4, maybe it will be justified. But then once black plays c4 first, playing b4 becomes very, very difficult because now I clamp down on this b3 square. And what you've done is you've given me more space on the queen side. You've crammed your pieces, and now your knight has 0 squares to develop on. So that becomes a question that you have to answer as to how you intend to develop your knight. The solution he came up with was queen c1, bringing the d2 square for the knight to come out, which is fine. I played castles, completing my development, and then he brought the knight out to d2. Now both sides have castled, both sides have completed the opening phase, so to speak, and now we enter a proper middle game. It's a fairly interesting structure with many imbalances, but perhaps the most obvious imbalance is in the pawn structure. First of the center is closed, which means you might be looking to attack on the flanks. And the pawn structure also gives both sides very clear plans, right? So black has this pawn structure that's pointing towards the queen side. What that means is that black will have more space on the queen side, white will have more space on the king side with his pawn structure pointing in this direction. Now, more space usually means you have more capability of attacking on that side because your pieces will have better squares. That's what space usually affords you. So black would be looking to build up an attack with like a6, b5, b4 over here on the queen side to try and open it up. And white should be looking to do something similar on the king side with like h3, g4, maybe like a knight h2, f4, f5, something like that. So I started with rook f c8, and the reason being that, of course, if my a rook comes to c8, then my f rook does not get to support my queenside expansion. If my f rook comes to c8, then my a rook can help out either on a8 or b8, whichever becomes more useful after I play a6 and b5. And then he went h3, sort of playing in line with what you expect, preparing a g4. Now my bishop is trapped with g4, not really trapped, but then I would have to go to e4 and then give the bishop up for a knight, which I don't want to do. So I played the intermediate h5. It's not really an intermediate move, but I played h5 to stop the idea of g4. And here I think white should continue in line with the same idea of playing on the king side with something like knight h2, f4, maybe this knight here preparing g4, something like that. But the move that he made looked a bit funny to me. Was king h2. It seemed to be a bit of a panicky move. I'm not sure what the idea was. I think in retrospect that he might have wanted to play rook g1 to play with the same idea of g4 and force it through. But this was not the way to go about it. What that did was weaken the king just a little bit, but also give me more opportunities, and we'll see that develop very soon. Another thing that I did was place the king on this diagonal. And remember, my plan is to play a6, b5 already. So I'm already looking for an opportunity to move my queen out of the way. So once I spotted this diagonal, the move queen c7 became very obvious. Looking out for ideas of playing a possible f6 to open up this position towards his king favorably. Because of this diagonal, he wasted another move, king h1. And now his last two moves look a bit clumsy, right? King h2, king h1. It signals that something has gone wrong with white's position. Now my previous plan was to continue with a6, b5, a5, b4. But here I noticed it was kind of slow because of his idea of playing rook g1. For example, if I play a6, rook g1, if I go b5, I guess I can make the moves instead of making you imagine things. If I go b5, he goes g4, and he's already getting to my position. Maybe not this exact sequence, but then my attack on the queen side is still at least two moves away from becoming coming to fruition, and he's already opened some lines towards my king. So I didn't want to get this kind of position where we both open up on our respective sides, but then I'm a move too slow. And I've already shown the move that I played, but here I spotted a very, very nice move, f6. Computer approved, so I was quite proud of finding this one. Basically flipping the script. no longer am I going to lay claim to the queen side and allow him to play on the king side, but then I'm going to try and challenge him on both sides of the board and claim that I'm simply better either way. And the reason I can do this is because my pieces are simply better. I compare them to his pieces. The bishops aren't too shabby, neither is his knight, but this knight on d2 is just so bad. And because of the lack of space on the queen side, the knight is cutting off two major pieces from the action, which means the center should open up right now. He's going to be playing at least a lot of material short. Another thing is that whenever you have more space like I do here on the queen side, it affords you the ability to move your pieces around the board faster than your opponent. You're more maneuverable. And positions where one side has more space, a lot of the time this is how it ends, that you pile up your pieces on one side of the board, you cause your opponent to become very passive, and then very quickly redirect all your pieces to the other side, which is something you can do much faster because you have more space. But by the time the opponent to be able to catch up on that side, it will be far too late. And something very similar happened in this game. So here I turn my attention over to the king side, arguing that I can actually transfer my major pieces to the king side very quickly, and then ask him the question of how many pieces does he have here defending his king side, and how easily will he get his pieces there, because mainly of the problem of this knight on d2. So f6 kind of signaled all these things, and so when he took on f6, because of my idea of transferring my major pieces, I wanted to open up the g file. I took back not with the bishop, but with the pawn, gx f6. And now my plan is simply to play king f7 to bring my rooks onto the g file, maybe double on it, and then attack his king. All the while still maintaining my superior space here on the queen side, and the future b5, a5, b4 is still not out of the question. So basically taking control of both sides of the board. Now he played rook g1, trying to fight back on the king side. I played king f7, bishop d1. The idea behind bishop d1 is to go to c2 and then cancel out my strong bishop here. Not a bad idea. I played bishop d6, basically getting all my pieces into the action. And he had also spotted a response that I wanted to make him reply to bishop c2, which is why I started with bishop d6. On bishop c2, I wanted to reply with a knight c e7, so that I don't have to take him and give him more space. But then I rather will want to take back on f5 with my knight and bring more of my pieces to the king side, which is ultimately what I want to do. Knight f1. So you see that him having these bad pieces is giving him a lot of issues in getting his pieces to the king side in time. If, for example, I'd started trading pieces on the last move, I would have made it a bit easier for him to get more of his pieces back. So that's one rule of thumb you always want to remember. Whenever you have more space, you want to avoid exchanges. Leave your opponent cramped and let him suffer the consequences. So knight f1, the knight looks quite clumsy, but the idea is, of course, that it's heading to g6. Then I played rook g8, queen d2. Finally, the queen is getting closer, but still there is one rook cut off. Rook g7, I'm going to double, and now all of my pieces are pointing in some way towards his king side. His rook finally joined, and I played rook a to g8. And now you see the point, still because of the problem of this knight, his rooks are not so well coordinated, and it's still quite clumsy for him. So here he played bishop h6, attacking my setup, making it a little clumsy. You don't want to go rook h7 here, although I think that was the move the computer wanted me to play. But I had seen this and that, prepared the response bishop f4, hitting the queen and forcing him to exchange his bishop. I took back with my knight. Now you can see the power of my position getting unleashed on the g2 square. My other knight is ready to join in the action. The queen is here. The bishop remains a threat. He has to find a way to defend. He came up with knight g3, which I thought was a mistake. I mean, the position is already very difficult. It's not too much of a mistake, but yeah, it allowed me a certain continuation, which was quite nice. I was happy I found it. And it started with playing bishop takes c2. Now, general principles wise, of course, the knight is hitting my bishop. So if I ever want to take on c2, now is the time. The second reason is that my knight is now on f5. It's a beautiful square, but also has this beautiful square here on d3, which is a proper outpost that my knight would want to take control over. but currently that square is controlled by the bishop. So one idea is just to take and then take over that outpost. Another problem here is the dark squares. The dark squares around his skin is a bit unsafe because the pawns are on the light squares, and he doesn't have a dark square bishop, so it's difficult for him to control these squares. But then my queen is on a dark square, looking at all these squares, and that becomes very relevant in the next few moves. So I played bishop c2. The queen took back. Now I could start with knights d3, but I prepared what I thought was an even nicer move. The shot is rook takes on g3, shattering his kingside defenses. And after pawn takes, now knight d3, hitting the rook, hitting that pawn. There's no way you can defend that pawn. Now my knight here on d3 is basically worth a rook, so it's not really much of a sacrifice. It's not a particularly tough move to find. Now he tried to protect the rook with rook e to f1. The machine doesn't like that. I think here the evaluation is around -1.2 or so, but after the move rook e f1, it becomes -7, and the position is just completely lost because of my next move, which I'll show very soon. But I want to show what the machine wanted him to do instead. He wanted to play this move, queen e2. I mean, the point is the knight is basically worth a rook if you want to take material back. You're not all that worried. And the other thing is that now you attack something of mine that is slightly difficult to defend, maybe like a queen d6 or something, and then you can continue playing the position. But after rook e f1, the position is completely lost after you find the next move. Not queen takes, but then the slightly more subtle knight f5, adding yet another attacker on the dark squares, pointing out the fact that white simply cannot defend those dark squares. And here the position is completely lost. There is no way to defend. He played a knight e5 check, giving up the knights with the idea of playing g4, hoping to pin my knight to my king and maybe win the knight back. But then that simply failed to h takes, because after h takes, rook h8 was checkmate, and that ended the game. So this was the first round. Unfortunately, I mean, it was a very nice game. I enjoyed it, but it was my favorite game from the entire tournament. I thought I played most precisely. Yeah, I didn't give him any chances at all. There are other wins, one in particular that looked more flashy, but this win was my favorite from the tournament. Also because I was playing an opening that I wasn't too comfortable with, but then the ideas and the tactics flew very smoothly from the strategical issues that came up. So it was quite a smooth win. I enjoyed it very much. It gave me a lot of confidence going forward. So yeah, that was the first round. A nice win as black in the Carib. And we moved on to round 2 with a lot of confidence. I'll see you in that video. Thank you for tuning in. Leave a like, drop a comment. You can point out any lines that I missed. I'm sure there will be plenty. Catch you later.